Good evening. I'm Dan Saltzman, and along with Linda Roseman, we are the co-chairs of the nonpartisan Brookline Neighborhood Alliance. The BNA is an umbrella organization for Brookline's various neighborhood associations. The neighborhood associations are their own entities. Some of them are very active. For example, the High Street Hill and Greater Point associations held their own candidates night recently, and they had a fantastic turnout. Other associations are not quite as energetic, and they just get activated when issues arise in their neighborhood, and that's fine too. But the BNA is a constant. We're always involved. We've been around for over 20 years. We act as something like an adhesive that holds all the neighborhood organizations together. We facilitate communications among the organizations, and we facilitate communications among the town, with the town. And we hold events like this one. The BNA's goal is to always keep neighborhood issues on the forefront. Tonight, we'll do just that by hearing from the candidates running for Select Board. Our focus, unsurprisingly, will be on neighborhood issues, and we'll hear a lot about that tonight, I hope. There have been something like 8 previous events like this one before this tonight, and some of those events were held by organizations with very definitive goals, some of those political, and that's fine. The BNA takes great pride in being objective and nonpartisan in everything that we do. Many of us on the BNA board have endorsed candidates running for Select Board, but our politics and our endorsements end when the BNA work begins. And our moderator tonight, Sean Lynn Jones, has not endorsed any candidate. Our goal tonight is to inform, and the BNA's goal is never to persuade. We have 3 candidates running. They're all here tonight. We thank them for that. They've previously been a part of several events like this, as I've said, and it requires an enormous amount of effort just to run for Select Board, as I think they've figured out. Being on the board also is a huge time investment. So the commitment that they've made is already impressive, and we thank them for the work that they've done so far. Such an extensive airing of thoughts and ideas like has happened in this campaign is a great service in itself to the town and to everybody that lives here. So all of these candidates care deeply about Brookline. They all have been involved in the town in various ways over the years, and we thank them for those efforts. We thank them for being here tonight to discuss, as you guessed it, neighborhood issues. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Linda Roseman.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone for coming. I was chosen to introduce the candidates because I'm one of the few people who can pronounce Carlos's last name. So without further ado, I want to introduce the candidates: Liz Linder, Carlos Rudrejo, and Michael Rubenstein. And I'd also like to introduce our moderator extraordinaire, Sean Lynn Jones. And Sean will explain the ground rules, and he will run the proceedings. And just so you know, Big is recording this. It's not being broadcast, but if you want to watch it again, you can go home and watch the video when it gets posted. So thank you. I'll turn it over now to Sean.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Dan. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this BNA forum. The BNA has been hosting forums like this one for more than 20 years, and I've moderated my fair share in that time. As was just pointed out, I have not endorsed any of the 3 candidates, and I will not make an endorsement between now and Election Day. And I'll try to do my best to apply the following rules impartially, but I will go over them so that the audience and the candidates all know. First, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. And we will have a timekeeper, Alyssa Jonas, in the blue in the front row, who will hold up signs to indicate when you have 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then when it's time to stop. After the opening statements, I will ask 5 questions that have been submitted by BNA members, and then we'll have questions from the audience. You may come up to the microphone at the lectern and identify yourself, or if you're feeling more comfortable about turning in an index card, Wendy will be handing them out and collecting them, and your questions can be read. Questions should be no longer than 1 minute, and they should be questions, not speeches. And they should all be addressed to all 3 candidates. They shouldn't, for example, ask a candidate to speak about their own record or something that's unique to that candidate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then at the end of the question and answer period, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. We'll rotate the order in which the candidates speak and answer questions, and we will aim to conclude at 8:30. To make that possible, there's one important ground rule for the audience. Please hold your applause until the end of this forum. Don't applaud after each candidate speaks or answers a question, or after a question is asked. It'll just take up time that we'd rather spend on the actual discussion. So without further ado, I did, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, you got that. Good. I'm sure they'll be watching you. The opening statements of 3 minutes are the first item on the agenda, and the order will be Liz, Carlos, and then Michael. Liz, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. We were just discussing how we should probably start rating the forums at some point because there have been 10, and some of them have had better food than others. So this town has been my home and the home of my photography business for over 20 years. I was initially drawn to Brookline for the vibrant live-work potential, walkable neighborhoods, and in fact, the neighborhood surrounding us right now is where I live and work. As a candidate, the perspective I bring to the select board is that of a middle-class, resident, and independent small business who can too easily be pushed out of Brookline. So in between debates around housing, complete streets, budget gaps, and leadership styles, my positions are formed and informed from the perspective of someone most affected by current issues in tangible ways rather than shaped by theoretical or ideological concerns. My condo in Brookline Village is one of the first examples in Brookline of a mixed-use building, and I lease commercial space down the street, also has a historic building. I work with a range of employees, contractors, and collaborators. My experience as both resident and small business owner is in a high-density, mixed-use neighborhood, the kind that we're talking about developing, and it gives me a very personal understanding of the many challenges facing us. From transportation and housing to balancing development and with infrastructure to the condition of our streets, to taxes. I pay both residential and commercial taxes, and general affordability. I should correct that. I pay taxes through my landlord, who pays them. I understand what it's like to wake up every day, look at budgets, aspirations and priorities, and really have to take care of business. And most Brookline residents say, by the way, their neighborhood is the best neighborhood. Yes, right? Which is a great sign. But too often, community members are late to know about projects that impact their neighborhoods. So delayed communications like this, thank you, end up wasting time, resources, and goodwill. As someone who works in and values effective communication, both verbal and visual, I aim to change this. I initially got involved in the town through committees as an abutter to nearby development projects. I learned how the community involvement and common sense has to guide these projects into ones that enhance the neighborhoods that they reside in. This is what makes for great neighborhoods and what will make for a great Brookline, and I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos, you're next.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance for organizing this town-wide forum. My name is Carlos Hidrejo. Brookline is a vibrant and diverse community made out of distinct neighborhoods, each with its own character. It has great parks, great schools. It's a great community. Unfortunately, there's something that affects us all, no matter where you live. Brookline is becoming increasingly unaffordable. If we want to preserve the diverse and vibrant community we all value, we must take action. If elected to the select board, I want to address affordability from day one. My goal to maintain a balanced budget without relying on recurring cycles of property tax overrides, an approach that increasingly burdens the middle class and those on fixed incomes. I'm concerned that if this trend continues, voters will eventually say enough, leaving us without a clear path forward. One of the most effective ways to address this challenge is through thoughtful commercial development that strengthens our commercial tax base. Other communities have done this successfully, so can we. We can achieve this through smart growth, an approach that expands commercial development to relieve pressure on tax and residential taxpayers, encourages housing that fits within the character of our neighborhood, supports our public services and infrastructure, and helps us meet our sustainability goals in a fiscally responsible way. I've been a strong advocate of smart growth for years because I believe It offers a realistic and responsible solution to our fiscal challenges. I'm the only candidate with years of professional and committee experience, the knowledge to address needed to address our ongoing budget shortfalls. Later tonight, I will talk more about my approach. But let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Spain and came to the U.S. at 17 to study architecture at Cornell and MIT. Then I met my wife 20 years ago, and we moved to Brookline. My son, who's 13, is now a Runkle student. I'm the only candidate with a kid currently in the public schools. In 2016, I became a U.S. citizen, and with that, it came with a deepened commitment to civil involvement. Since 2019, I've served on the Town Advisory Committee, where my background as registered lead accredited architect has been a real asset. Serving on this committee has provided me with invaluable insight into the workings of municipal government. I've served on the Sustainability, Land Use, and Zoning and Capital subcommittees, and I've been appointed to multiple zoning and planning committees, including the Lower Boylston Street Committee, Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study Committee, and the Fisher Hill West Committee. Experience matters, and the combination of my professional background as an architect together with my town government experience speaks for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Rubenstein, and I'm running to be your next Select Board member. Thank you to the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance for hosting this forum. My wife and I moved to Brookline 32 years ago. We raised our 2 children here. They went to the Heath School. We love living in Brookline. But Brookline also has its challenges. Finding reasonably priced housing is very difficult. Living in Brookline is very expensive. And we have a budget that causes our town services to be underfunded, and our budget is stretched. I'm running for Select Board because I have a set of skills and experiences that I believe can help Brookline face these challenges. I've developed these skills and experiences over a 25-year business career, followed by over a decade of public service. In 1985, my brother and I founded Cambridge Soft Software. Over the next 25 years, we built up that business, and when we sold the business in 2011, we had almost 400 people working for us worldwide. We had to listen to our customers, we had to set goals, develop solutions, all while keeping a close eye on our finances. I believe these skills will be put to good use on the Select Board. Subsequently, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to public service, tackling complex problems in healthcare, in education, and in housing. In town meeting, I was advocating for more affordable housing as one of the founders of the Yes in Brookline Coalition that helped organize for the town's acceptance of compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. Ultimately, Yes in Brookline and Brookline by Design came to an agreement, and that agreement was ratified by 84% of the votes cast in favor at town meeting. And I am the only Select Board candidate who supported that consensus. Now, I'm looking to put my skills and experience to work for you on the Select Board. So thank you all very much. I look forward to your questions tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. So, question number 1 is, I think it's fair to say that all 3 of you care about our town and have many of the same goals and values. Could each of you tell us what differentiates you from the other 2 candidates? And the order will be Carlos, Michael, then Liz. So Carlos, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
So I spoke a little bit about my experience, both professionally as an architect and also as a very involved resident in Brookline. I've been for the last 5 years at the advisory committee, which is the finance committee, which goes through the whole process of going through the budget, all the warrant articles. We analyze, we're probably the group that analyzes town government deepest of all. And that gives you a very good insight that is hard to get otherwise. We meet sometimes twice a week for 3 or 4 or 5 hours in some cases. And we have additional subcommittee meetings. So we get to not only meet the staff, but also talk about things in a very deep level. Professionally, when you're an architect, you have to put a building together. You have to work with different consultants. Architects work with engineers, structural engineers, MEP, all kinds of different groups. And you need to have the big idea of what you're doing when you're consolidating all the different trades and expertises. And that can be translated to in many different ways to different aspects of life. And I think it works really well for something like the select board, where we're here to give direction of how, of where the town should go. We already have a couple business members on the select board, and I think in view from the architecture and construction side would be something that is welcomed. And I see that Elisa has there.
Thank you. Michael, you're next.
So I would differentiate myself in 2 particular ways. First of all of the work that I have done, both in my business career and my public service career, has focused on leadership and also on delivering results. I've also sat on committees in a number of other contexts, but I think the work that I do best is when I am taking on complex problems, listening to other people to identify their concerns, and also come up with and uncover new solutions that will help solve those problems. I do a lot of data analytical work. I also do a lot of work synthesizing different points of view. And I think that all of those talents are necessary for the executive body that leads that particular branch of government. So I would say leadership and delivering results for everybody that are durable.
Thank you. Liz.
Well, I would say the first thing is that I am living in the middle of it. I am front and center to a lot of development. It impacts me very directly, and I can see from a front row perspective what happens when things shift. So design matters. I work in a visual communication industry, and I'm very sensitive to design. I've been appointed to a number of committees, and I've seen into a range of industries. I think that is, I work for biotech, I work for finance, I work for development, technology, done a lot of work for architectural firms. I'm usually in the boardroom with the leaders, like, Dr. Fauci at one point. So I sort of see how different things come together. And in my work for years, I've been in the position of needing to please and make excellent work out of a lot of different needs, a lot of seemingly competitive needs. My industry, the reason I've been successful in this industry for as long as I have been is because I know how to work with people and I know how to bring out the best in people. And I think that is something that I think it's a unique perspective that the select board is currently missing. Not the people part, but the living in the middle of it, being a resident and a business owner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second question is a 2-part question, but the 2 parts are closely related. Part A is, what do you love about your own neighborhood and why? And then part B, recognizing that most Brookline residents love their particular neighborhood, how do you view the trade-off between more development and maintaining neighborhood character? So A is about why you love your own neighborhood, and B, that trade-off between development and maintaining neighborhood character. So we'll start with Michael, then Liz, then Carlos.
So I have a vision that I have talked about for Brookline that consists of three parts. A vibrant and diverse community filled with thriving small businesses and homes for every stage of life, interwoven with the natural world. And I get a glimpse of that vision every time I walk from my home near the Hayes School, through Waldstein Park, down Beacon Street to meet a friend in Washington Square. And it is that mix of different environments that I really love about our neighborhood. So to the second part of your question about development, I believe that maintaining neighborhood character is an important part of what makes Brookline wonderful. And there are different characters, whether it's North Brookline and South Brookline, whether it is dense areas or areas that have more spread out housing and more tree canopy. All of those different elements have to be respected and understood. So for example, in the single family zoning districts, I would never ever think about abolishing single family zoning. But we have a lot of different areas within Brookline that are opportunities for more dense development, and those differences we should be able to take advantage of, because those areas of dense development are also opportunities to increase the revenue that will relieve the strain on our town budget.
Thank you very much. Liz, you're next.
So this is my neighborhood, and it's exciting to be in this neighborhood. I was drawn to it because it is very diverse. It's got a great mix of residential and commercial. I walk every essentially, and there's a lot of green space. I mean, I can walk my dog down in Olmsted Park, so that's how amazing. Exciting. I can walk to a park. I live in a 4-story walk-up with no green space. And you know, it would be easy not to leave this neighborhood. You know, could run to town hall, get my groceries, take care of business. Anyway, how do I feel about development? Part of what I love about Brookline Village is that it's growing. It's vibrant. It's, we can't freeze it in time, but the character of the neighborhoods, the historic buildings in Brookline of all different sorts and all different neighborhoods are things that we need to really consider as we're thinking about growth. We really need to think about valuing what we have, tree canopy, walkability as we move forward. And I'm excited about development. I work for many, people who plan development. It's exciting to think about, but it has to be done so that it fits in the neighborhood, or it's not a good neighbor. Thank you.
Carlos.
So I guess the question is really where your neighborhood ends, because so my neighborhood is pretty compact, but it's connected to other neighborhoods that are nearby, and I think one of the how you have all these different neighborhoods that interact with each other, and that makes it all much varied, interesting place, because you have all these different characteristics. Some places are more single family, some places are more multi-families. There are different densities. Some places have more commercial, but it's a very walkable. I'm thinking now of Rebecca. More walkable town in the parts where I am. Now, I think what happens if you, with development, you have to be very careful about how you apply new development. But we have to make sure, and one way is you can say that you're not going to. But if you do an overlay which allows, for example, larger multifamilies within a single family zone, then ultimately what happens is that the single families get replaced. So we have to think about things comprehensively. The comprehensive plan, I think, is going to help us a lot with how we introduce more development. there's a great opportunity for, as I mentioned in my intro, for commercial development so that we can expand the commercial tax base, and that will allow us to make the town more affordable and expand the possibilities that Town Hall can do with its citizens.
Thank you very much. The third question, I think, gives you an opportunity perhaps to build on some of the things you've just been saying and maybe add more if you'd like. It's a more general question. What kind of development do you support in Brookline? How much and where? So we'll begin with Liz, then Carlos, then Michael.
It's a very specific question, how much. But what kind of development? I do like the idea of mixed-use development, and I also like the idea of more commercial because we need it. How much is going to be somewhat dictated by where we can build, and we are a little more limited when we talk about building up the commercial tax base. We have more limits than, say, a city like Newton or Somerville or Watertown does. So we just have to think about that and what does that mean. I live in a mixed-use building. I love being able to walk downstairs and find goods and services, and it's there's something really intelligent about that. There's something where you need, the potential is that you don't need as many cars per resident. The potential is that it is a greener way to live. The potential is that it's vibrant, you're closer to your neighbors. It's better on energy resources, and so I would say that's for me, a little bit more of where I focus. Thanks.
Thank you. Carlos.
So how much development? Well, the comprehensive plan, I think, is going to help us decide what is appropriate for Brookline to increase its development and also where it should happen. That's why we're doing it. I think it's, the market is also going to define a lot of how much of the proposed development would actually happen. But I think we also need to make sure that we understand that, so for many years, we have ignored our commercial opportunities and to expand the commercial tax base. And that has gotten us into a cycle of having to rely on recurring overrides to deal with the budget. And now we have an opportunity before it all gets gobbled up by non-commercial program to fix that, or to at least move towards that direction. What we have to understand is that commercial development has a lesser strain on town services versus the taxes it collects. Mixed use, unless it's very heavy on the commercial side and then less on the residential side, could be a wash of how much of the revenues that are collected versus the ones that we have to spend for services in schools. And residential is always a loss. And this is something that our consultant, RJK, has been stressing during our meeting with the Chestnut Hill Commercial Committee. So we have to make sure that we focus on that aspect of the financial stability of the town when we do our development.
Thank you. Michael.
So in terms of the kinds of development, a lot of us have talked about mixed-use development as well as expanding our commercial base, and I agree with that. The challenge that we face in Brookline now is not the lack of places, identifying places to develop. We have a housing production plan, we've got the comprehensive plan, we've done numerous neighborhood studies. The challenge that I believe we actually face is identifying the barriers to the development that we need in order to get the tax revenue from those locations to relieve the strain on our budget. So as a member of the select board, the task that I think is before us and the goal that I would set is to identify what those barriers are and to relieve them. You know, if you wanted a specific number of units or a specific number of square footage of commercial real estate, I think that any number that any one of us would propose or any current select board member would propose is going to be higher in terms of our needs than what are the barriers that we have in place, whether they are zoning or barriers in process, whatever those barriers are, or financial barriers such as high interest rates, whatever those barriers are will allow. So I would say that the answer to your question is we need more of that kind of development than we can currently get with the barriers that we have in place.
Thank you very much. Fourth question turns to questions of the town budget. Just about everyone who's looked at Brookline's town budget agrees that we need to find ways to increase revenue. I haven't heard anyone say we should be reducing revenue, so I think this is a pretty widely shared view. Now, here are two possibilities that have been floated, and I'll ask you about those. Do you support a real estate transfer tax? And or would you support increasing the Community Preservation Act, CPA, surcharge, which is currently 1% on tax bills? So real estate transfer tax and or CPA increased surcharge as ways of bringing in revenue. And the order will be Carlos, Michael, and then Liz.
So I think there is a long-term and the short-term answer to this. The long-term answer is we need to, again, find ways to expand our commercial tax base so that we can go into a sustainable pot of money. The RET has to go through a home rule petition. We already tried it once. Unless something has changed in the state, we can go ahead and try it again, but I'm not sure if it's going to go through. So that takes a few years for that to go through. The CPA tax, or increasing the CPA fee or tax, is something that we could look at, but we have to make sure that of how we use the CPA monies. And if we, for example, are able to relieve some of the CIP projects because of funding, or if we're able to build some, for example, some of the housing deed of restricted housing, affordable housing on town land with CPA money, then that could probably be a good use of that money. But we have to make sure of how we use it, because once we start taxing people more, then the diversity of the town gets reduced. And I think the short version of the answer would be that one.
Okay. Thank you. Michael, you're next.
So I'd like to focus on the real estate transfer fee. I think the CPA funding is working well, and at the moment we can just leave it alone. Now, just so everybody has a common understanding, the real estate transfer fee, as Carlos mentioned, is a home rule petition, and I believe that there are other communities throughout Massachusetts that are also working on this in somewhat of a coordinated effort. And I also believe that there is a bill at the State House, and Representative Vitolo, I believe, can confirm this, that in order to implement some sort of enabling legislation so that towns and cities can implement various forms of a real estate transfer fee. Now, the specifics of the real estate transfer fee warrant article that we have, I think, calls for the possibility of up to 2%. In my opinion, that number should be 1%, which is approximately the amount that we pay for a year's worth of property taxes, which basically means that if you sold your home, then as part of that sale, you would owe an additional 1% in order to fund affordable housing. It is also the case that we are in an environment where the National Association of Realtors has had an agreement in order to lower their commissions. So I believe that the net of those two things would actually overall lower the costs for sellers. So now is actually a good time to balance those two concerns, which will play out over time. And so I believe it should be a 1% fee. I also believe that it should be focused on affordable housing. And if we want to increase money for the general fund or for our capital improvements, then we should be looking at our free cash flow model, which includes an allocation to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and see whether that is still necessary in light of the RETF.
Thank you. Liz?
So I think the first thing for me would be the real estate transfer fee. It sounds right now like a good idea. It seems like it's got a lot of support, and we can put some thresholds in there to protect people on fixed incomes. I agree that it should be a lower percentage. I think the danger is that some people are going to pay a heavy price, people who are house rich and cash poor. So we want to protect them, and just look at the percentages and thresholds so that we do that. The other thing is there's a amendment right now. John Van Scoyac and Paul Warren, I think, put an amendment in so that the money could actually go to the general fund, or it be split between the general fund and the other fund. And that, to me, seems like a better idea. Also, I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The fifth question is a good one to ask as we get toward the end of this campaign and all of the other forums that you've participated in. Based on the conversations you've had with voters and the many, 10 or whatever number there has been of forums that you've attended during the campaign, please choose the one issue or concern that residents have shared with you that would impact their neighborhood, and talk about how you would address it. We'll start with Michael, and then Liz, and then Carlos.
So there have certainly been many. And the biggest issue, I think, that has come up has probably been in my conversations largely with parents, but with others as well, about the challenges with the school budget and whether or not the town and the school should adjust the funding mechanisms that they have in place in order to fund the schools versus funding other town services. And I have been very clear over the course of the campaign thus far that my solution to that is always going to be twofold. Number one, we always have to look for efficiencies in the way that we deliver our services. And number two, we have to figure out ways to grow the revenue pie. We've talked about that more in the previous step, but I believe that the select board has a key role in both of those areas. For example, I trust that the audit that is being put in place of both of the school budget will be helpful in uncovering efficiencies. And I look forward to finding out what those are and implementing them. And I also look forward to finding out the barriers to new growth so that we can expand the pie and we're not relying on cuts every single year, whether because of inflation or because of a lack of revenue.
Thank you. Liz?
So the budget issues are hard to ignore, and I hear a lot about that, but I want to talk about actually something very that we deal with every day right in front of us, which has to do with transportation and parking and complete streets, because our roads have been in disrepair for a long, long time. It seems straightforward, but it's not as straightforward as you think. There are issues with users of the roadways, how we rebuild our roadways, how we access different parts of town, what connects South Brookline and North Brookline. Can people access the business districts? Can they do business here? Are we going to drive the commercial, the small businesses out of Brookline because they can't keep their clients coming here because they can't, their clients can't find parking? So I hear a lot about that, probably because I'm a small business owner and I talked with a lot of the other small business owners. And I'm committed to finding balance so that we can have healthy streets, we can have safe access for multiple users. We can revisit how we park. I have gotten into the Washington Street Complete Streets project, 2 parking studies in both commercial districts and wayfinding. I want to see better communication that happens with neighborhoods, so that neighbors are informed, like the Chestnut Hill Ave Complete Streets project. Nobody knew what was happening until it had progressed to a certain point. I think good communication actually will go a long way towards, it's actually an efficiency. So we'll save some resources that way. And that is, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Carlos.
So I think it's hard to say just one thing, because there are 2 really big comments that always come, and they're equally important, I think, to the citizens. One of them is neighborhood character. Everybody that I've talked to was really worried about losing the neighborhood character, because that's why they moved to Brookline. They moved to Brookline because it felt right to them, how the size of the buildings, the tree canopy, the schools, in some ways, neighborhood character, but now they also are feeling the pressures from affordability. So I think those 2 are come hand in hand, in that they want to be able to stay in the neighborhoods that they chose, but they are feeling the pressure from the tax side to be able to stay there. And then they also see, that they see the budget gap at the schools. They see the roads that are not in quite good shape, and they wonder where all the money that they're being collected, where that's going. So I think addressing those two parts, how to expand the build more, but keep the neighborhood character, and how to break the cycle of the structural gap, would be two things that I think are important to the residents that I spoke to.
Thank you. Well, at this point, we've had 5 questions that were prepared in advance and submitted by BNA members and put on the agenda by the BNA board. If there are questions from the audience, we would gladly take them now. And you can either come up to the microphone to ask, or Wendy has cards that you could write them on, and maybe there are some on cards already. I don't know. Well, someone's coming to the microphone, and why don't we hear from the person and then go to the card?
Talk into the microphone.
If you want to come up, you should just come up and line up, and we'll take you in whatever order.
Please identify yourself and ask your question, and try to keep it as short as possible.
Okay, Karen Aqualine. I live in Brookline Village, and I'm interested, I'd like to ask a question that asks you to balance priority and strategy. So we all have many things we'd like to see happen in Brookline, but there's also the question of understanding what would need to happen within the mechanisms of the town government, what the possibilities are in terms of how town government works, and what the possibilities are for coalitions within the town. And so I'd like to ask you to choose one issue that would be a priority for you that you think that you would actually be able to make progress on, and how you would do that, why you think you would be able to make progress on that issue, considering town governance and also possibilities for coalitions.
Thank you. Answers will be first from Liz, then Carlos, then Michael.
So something I think I can really impact has to do with the business community and communication and processes. I would like to see simpler processes around businesses when they want to open, simplifying permitting, simplifying, the process that it takes to get a sign, speeding up the time between when they want to open and when they actually can open. That way we'll attract more small businesses here, and we'll keep our neighborhoods vibrant in these commercial districts. We'll also, it feeds into this whole idea of commercial being the, something that's going to really help us, because we want to be able to bring commercial businesses into Brookline in order to help with the tax base. So it impacts everything. And to me, that also, it ties into complete streets and parking, and making sure that there's smart loading zones, very clear wayfinding. If we are going to do a complete streets project, making sure that it works for the businesses and access for people who need cars, including safety for bikers and pedestrians, just balancing all of this. I feel like I can have impact there. Thank you.
Carlos.
So I think that the approach that we use to do a lot of the decision making is the one that has to be modified in some ways. We have to look at things comprehensively. And the perfect example of a project that is causing a lot of upheaval is actually the Washington Street project, because it feels, to some it feels, they're wondering how it's fitting in the overall project for the town. Is this a independent project from the rest of the complete streets project? Is it taking into consideration the neighborhood needs, the parking needs, the business needs? And I think we need to do a better job on the transparency of how those decision makings are happening. We can't do any complete street projects without involving the neighborhoods and without the consensus of the neighborhoods, because otherwise it just doesn't work for anybody. And that applies to other projects, for example, zoning projects, where being on, for example, on the Boylston Street Committee for Lower Boylston, neighborhood consensus is important for new development. But we also have to see how all that fits in within the larger picture. And if the master plan, and here the comprehensive plan would work, if the master plan is going to demonstrate that we need, for example, commercial development in these areas and housing in these other areas, then we have to work with those neighborhoods so that the whole neighborhood understands that within the neighborhood and the town, this will be a positive move in the future. So I think transparency, communications is something that we need to sort of work more and make sure that people are feeling heard when we're doing all these projects.
Thank you. Michael.
So first of all, I want to thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. I also noticed that you talked about coalitions a couple of times. And so I want to talk about the way that I would approach this using two areas of my expertise. One is when I was doing public service work, a lot of that work was in community organizing and meeting with people to understand the challenges that they were facing in order to develop solutions that would actually meet their needs. And trying to find what the sweet middle was for a solution so that it balanced the needs of a variety of group of stakeholders is really the kind of work that I believe that I would be able to bring to my to being on the select board. The other part that I would say specifically in response to communication, there are a lot of cases where we have we need to have larger projects that span multiple areas within town government and also within the community, and identifying, again, the stakeholders, establishing goals amongst all of those stakeholders, and having good processes in place for bringing those goals to solutions and then holding ourselves accountable for those solutions is an important part of communicating the process of how various progress can be made.
Thank you. I'm going to take the question that came in on a card. I think we'll be able to get to everyone who's coming up to the microphone, the way things look. This question comes from someone who lives in North Brookline, off Harvard Street. And they note that development on Harvard Street has been intense. So the question is, are you in favor of developing other areas of Brookline to take pressure off North Brookline development? And the order of the answers for this question will be Carlos, then Michael, then Liz.
There are many kinds of development. So I'm just going to assume that it's housing and commercial development. And the reality of a lot of what development needs. So, for example, commercial development needs to be near transit, so that people who are working in this development can actually get to work and be able to be efficient about it. Housing works both also near mass transit, but also works well outside of those areas. So I think it's hard to propose some kind of equal types of development throughout all of Brookline, because we really are a collection of circumstances. We have South Brookline, which is not accessible by rapid transit, it's accessible by bus. And then you have North Brookline that is very accessible by the T. So how do you balance those two is hard, and how do you distribute the development? It's also hard because of the physical geography of our town.
Right, thank you. Michael, you're next.
So the answer to the question is yes. I am in favor of spreading our development out, and as many of us know, we have identified opportunities in different places in Brookline, not just North Brookline, in order to develop both housing, mixed-use development, and commercial development. It's obviously a challenge for North Brookline that the Harvard Street corridor, which was part of the MBTA Communities Act consensus, was the first big change to our zoning code in half a century. And that fact sort of leads people naturally to wonder whether or not other opportunities will also be leveraged within the town. But I certainly can commit myself to not stopping with the Harvard Street corridor or North Brookline, but looking at Lower Boylston, looking at Chestnut Hill West, looking at TJ Maxx, and looking at Putterham Circle or other areas within our town that can support more housing, mixed-use development, and commercial development.
Liz, you're next.
So, yes, I agree that development can happen in other neighborhoods. What I'm interested in is thoughtful development, development that works within the community, development that has a robust community feedback. I am on the comprehensive plan, and all of the areas that we you've mentioned are possible for development. What we really need is for people to be showing up to speak towards what kind of development they feel fits in the neighborhood. Now, there's also the question of the greater good. What got me into this entire conversation a while ago was the Kent Station Street Affordable Senior Housing project. And that is a project that I was in a butter of, and I first opposed it. And when I realized that, listen, I can't control the environment around me. I don't have that kind of means. And this is something that would be for the greater good of the community. I got onto every committee that there was till we picked a developer and found the process to be very invigorating and very rewarding. And, there are ways to give input so that you can have a good project. And I would say, all of these all these parcels that we're talking about have potential, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take a question from the microphone. Kathleen Cavell, you probably don't need to identify yourself, but if you could say who you are and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Sean. Like Sean, I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 1. My name is Kathleen Cavell. I've been in town meeting forever, long before you were born, for instance. My question is, I think a lot of us in this room and outside of it are very aware of the pressure and the bullying and the attempts to overwhelm what cities and towns and others have been doing for many years that's successful on the part of the federal administration. And I'd like to ask each of you what your experience is working with bullies, if you have anything to add there, and how you see what the town can do in order to ward off and protect the things that require protection from what this administration is trying to do to blue states, red states, everyone right now, universities, law firms, everybody, and have you thought about what the select board can and should be thinking about in the face of these onslaughts? Thanks.
Thank you, Kathleen. The order of the answers this time will be Michael, then Liz, then Carlos.
So thank you for that question, Kathleen. One of the pleasures, yes, it is a pleasure and a joy of this campaign, is that it has forced me to think really deeply about the values that I hold and how we trade off those values under various circumstances. And when I think about your question about standing up to bullies or dealing with the federal government or dealing with adversity in many different guises, the first question I come back to is, what are the values that we hold? And how are we communicating and sharing those values? And how are we incorporating values that may be held in tension in the specific matters that we are asked to consider? So in terms of dealing with the federal government, obviously we have a value of our own fiscal responsibility, so we have to understand our finances, understand where we have risks of losing federal funding if we take certain positions, and where we don't. What are the strengths and the opportunities we have within our community? What are the benefits that we can gather from the diversity that we hold as a group, and the various opinions and perspectives that we can gather? And I believe that as a select board, that is the first step and the necessary step in order to be able to gather and stand up together as a community to respond to the pressures from outside.
Thank you. Liz.
So I'm not a fan of a bully, number one. And I don't, let me think of how to put this. I've dealt with bullies, and I've always navigated my way through, around, or over them to date, right? So there are a lot of different ways to deal with bullies. You know, you can sidestep, you can let them punch nothing, you can throw stones at them. I mean, there's like theoretically there are a lot of ways to deal with bullies. First of all, our exposure right now on the town side is very minimal financially. It's not very minimal, but it's reasonably minimal financially. The school side has some other is a little bit more caught up in the financials, but we do need to know, we need to understand where our weaknesses are, you know, or our vulnerabilities, and how we can shore ourselves up. I also understand that we have a policy of not collecting information on immigrants, so we have nothing to offer. So that, you know, there's some protections that we have in place, and, you know, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of pressure coming from the federal government, and we're going to need to work together as a community and stand up for our values, and there's so many different ways to do that. I think, you know, in 30 seconds left, the answer is case by case and working, you know, together. Thank you.
Carlos.
So I've encountered plenty of bullies in my lifetime, even recently. And I think the way that I've dealt with them is to either ignore them, which gets them even more frustrated, or to sort of, as Liz said, you know, over, under, through, whichever way it is. Now, we're lucky that we live in Brookline. We're lucky that we live in Massachusetts, because our values are strengthened by those two locations. We have a community that understands what our values are, and also a state that supports our values. Fortunately, as Liz said, we don't, other than BHA and the Beacon Street bridle path, we're not relying excessively on the federal government. But we may have to think about those projects if, for example, the Bridle Street, if something happens where the federal administration decides not to give us the money for that project. The same thing could happen also if the state doesn't get the money. Then how are we going to, we're going to get less money than we normally would get from the state. But we have learned in the past to not rely necessarily too much on state money on a regular basis. So I think just working as the issues come up, which could be weekly, working together to see what the options are. And I think that sort of gets you to a good place. It's very unknown what's happening, so thank you for the question.
Thank you. Roger, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Roger Blood, longtime resident, affordable housing advocate, former town meeting member. This being the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance Forum, and the theme being largely neighborhoods, and I think it began with a discussion of most, or if not all of us, feel like the neighborhood that we live in is the best. It's also remarkable, if not unique, given our limited geography, the diversity of the neighborhoods that we think are so wonderful. My question is, we have this current decision to make about whether to remain a town or to become a city. Without getting into the weeds, what are your thoughts looking at the prospect of being a select board in a town for the moment? How being a city would affect or not affect yours and our views of the quality of life in our neighborhoods? Thank you.
The order for these answers will be first Liz, then Carlos, then Michael.
So that's a great question, and the way you positioned it is particularly interesting. I specifically love the the way that town government is accessible to so many people who live in the neighborhoods that, you know, they're governed by. Did that just make sense? That didn't quite make sense. Okay, so the accessibility of town government to residents is, to me, it's just an incredible thing. The fact that there are people in a precinct who represent their neighbors and go to town meeting and understand how the government works is very exciting. Sorry, could you just, there was a part at the end of the question that I wanted to respond to, but it was something about how the neighborhood, how it impacts the neighborhood.
Well, thinking of the theme of this particular forum, how do you feel like if we were to become a city, it might affect or not the quality of life of yourselves and everybody else who lives in their own particular neighborhood?
It's a good question. So I know that there's a lot of talk about studying this, and I think I'd like to understand better how being a city would impact me as a resident in order to answer that question. And that's something that, you know, we're all capable of looking at. I like the idea that I can participate so fully in the built environment, in development, in what's happening around me, and you know, you can, serving on select board after a year or two, I might have a different idea about that, right? But at this point in time, I find that, you know, the lack of consolidation of power and the ability to show up at meetings and have a voice is for part of the rewarding part of living in the neighborhood that I live in.
Thank you. Carlos.
So our current form of government allows you to have a very diverse viewpoint and opinions, because we have 255 town meeting members versus, for example, maybe 12 city council members, and so that by sheer numbers is just a much larger or more diverse group. I think, for example, what happened in Cambridge, where they decided to rezone all of Cambridge, except for the historic areas, for multifamily housing, and then the way that the people are reacting to that. It feels there was a disconnect there between the city making decisions, city council making decisions, and the people who live in Cambridge. So I think for that to happen here, it would be much harder, because you would have to convince 255 people to vote one way without the rest of the residents knowing about it, and which is sort of how it feels like that. So a more diverse group of viewpoints, a possibility of participating in government to lesser or greater degrees, and also easier to be elected as a town meeting member, because you just are you're dealing with your precinct rather than town-wide, which would require you to raise a lot of money, which then would reduce, I think, the number of people who would be able to run for a town-wide office. So I think that collection of characteristics is what makes us more efficient or better for our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Michael.
So first of all, thank you for the question, Roger. I want to acknowledge, just looking out across this room, that there are probably centuries of experience just sitting in this room within town government. And Brookline has been very well served by those centuries of contribution. But I also think it's important, two things that I think are very important. The first is that I am definitely in favor of a formal process to examine the pros and cons of many different forms of government, towns, cities, and variations thereon, to really be able to articulate, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and what are the values that we are trying to hold as a community as they are applied to those strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, we've talked about community input. We also should talk about accountability. We should talk about transparency and ease of communication. We should talk about the challenges of getting sufficient input versus the challenges of actually making progress towards articulated goals. All of these things should come up properly within that formal process. The second thing that I would say is that it is very important that it is not just the 255 people who are part of town meeting that we should keep in mind. Brookline has a population of 63,000 some odd and something, and it is really for all of the residents that we should be structuring our form of government. And so when we ask the question of what form of government should we be having, the answer should not be what is the best for me or what is the best for a small group of us, but what is the best that serves everyone.
Thank you very much. We're starting to get near the scheduled ending time for this forum of 8:30, but we did start 5 minutes late. I think we have 2 questions. Arthur, do you have a question or not? So let's take 2 questions from the microphone. We've got a couple more on cards, but you go ahead. I think we can get in all the questions, but we'll have to cut
I'll
it
keep
off
it brief,
of
Arthur.
the microphone after
And
Arthur.
Maybe the responses can be brief too.
I'll vote for that.
All right. Now my time starts. Change and growth are really challenging. Picking up on Michael's last word, challenges. And I think that living in this town, I really feel that we are in a time, it is a pivotal time, and it is really a time of challenge. So we hear about more housing. We hear about affordability, which can come in many different shapes and forms. And we hear about commercial development and how we do it, and that it could be the answer to many of the things that we want to, that we aspire to. So my question is, what's doable?
Could you identify yourself too, please?
Charles Osborne.
Thank you.
And we live in Brookline Village. Thank you.
So the question is, what's doable, and you want a short answer?
What is really doable?
Okay.
And maybe some examples of what we talk about doing that maybe isn't so doable. I hope that what's doable.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. Now we'll start with Carlos, then Michael, then Liz.
So what's doable? I think what's doable is, we have examples of what has happened. For example, at Fisher Hill, we had a 6-story building next to single-family residential homes, which was approved by 85% of the, or even higher percentage of the neighborhood. And it's a senior housing project that for 160 units or so. Which is bringing a hefty amount of tax money. Now, that is doable because it was done through a very transparent process that also had neighborhood buy-in, and no one felt that something was happening without them knowing. So I think that's the key, is how to do things with the neighborhood, but also do things that the developers are able to achieve. And if what we're proposing sometimes is not something that can be achieved immediately or even in the short term or the longer term, I think we need to sort of revisit that and see why, for example, nothing has happened on MBTA-CA Harvard Street. The only project that has happened there is a Dover project, which is the early childhood center that is being proposed at the bank. Emerald Island too. We've thrown everything in there, and we've had a hotel happen, but nothing much more. So we have to start seeing, what's preventing those projects from happening, and how to fix it, and how to make it much more doable.
Thank you, Michael.
So, Charles, thank you for that question. And it's a great question, and it's a great start of a question. You asked what is doable. And so from my sort of experience in setting up goals and finding solutions, the first question I would ask is over what time frame and over what space, right? And according to which stakeholders. I think the general answer to your question is that typically we can do less than we imagine, so it is important for us to have a broad imagination. We have talked about various projects. Some are part of the comprehensive plan, some are projects that have been studied in the past. And in a sense, they are all doable over some sort of time frame. And the question really is, what are the goals that we have as a town? And what is the will that we are willing to apply, and the trade-offs that we're willing to make? And so from my perspective, the work of the select board, and my work on the select board in particular, is to be able to come up with concrete answers to that question, which I don't have today. We have theoretical things, but it's to come up with answers to those questions, identify the barriers, set the goals, and then work to deliver on those goals. So I just leave it there.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Charles. So one of the things that I have noticed, first of all, really appreciate what both of you said, and especially Carlos in terms of looking at why things aren't necessarily working. One thing I've noticed that has been doable, but I'm not sure is what we all are striving for, is that historic buildings get taken down and $3 million condos get put up in their stead, and that is working against what we're looking to do, in my imagination, for the future of Brookline, making Brookline more affordable. So thoughtful zoning and thoughtful planning and form-based zoning is a step in the direction of what's doable, and getting buy-in from the community so that we can pass those, new zoning laws through the comprehensive plan is a step in the right direction towards what's doable. And there are certain things that we can't control, like interest rates and lulls in building. That is part of there are cycles of building. So that's part of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur, it's your turn.
Thank you very much.
And could you identify yourself, please?
I will. Arthur Conquest, town meeting member, Precinct 6. I asked this question at the South Brookline, or part of it in the South Brookline forum, and I'm not sure that I got an answer that I was comfortable with. So I'm going to try and ask it again a little differently. This is two parts. Do you think the virus of racism, apartheid, white supremacy exists in Brookline? And number two, if you do think it does, tell me and others present here on the Zoom what you would do to eliminate this virus if you were elected to the select board. Thank you. And I say this because I've had to live with some of this for 40 some odd years, okay? And it does have an impact at some point on your life. Thank you.
The order of the answers will be Michael, Liz, then Carlos.
So thank you, Arthur, for that question. And thank you for your persistence in raising this as a concern for all of us. The answer to the first part of your question is obviously yes. You have lived that experience, and you are certainly not alone. And that experience has come to different members of our community in different guises, whether it is racism, sexism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, ageism, disability issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the necessary step, from my perspective, is to understand that across our community, across all of Brookline, we are one community of individuals, and we each bring our individual selves fully and to this community. And regardless of the color of your skin or whatever abilities you may or may not possess, or your gender or gender identity, your sexual orientation, all of it, right? The first step is to recognize us as individuals, right? We each bring uniqueness and preciousness to Brookline, and I want to be able to celebrate that and listen to it and absorb it and reflect it back across the community. You know, all of those pieces, and it's hard work. It is incredibly hard work. But that is the work that we have to do as leaders and as community members all.
Thank you.
Liz.
Thank you, Arthur. It's unfortunate that we even have to be talking about this, because it's, you know, all of the isms and all of the phobias and all of the, you know, disregard for human beings that comes across in so many different ways, neglect or, you know, actual, you know, hate and violence it's just incredibly upsetting. I am not schooled in the institutional language around, you know, DEI, because I've only had a company and I've worked for myself and hired, you know, as diversely as I could, and shown. My job has always been to show invisible people. I think we need to work to build bridges. Sometimes fighting things directly makes them stronger. And I feel very strongly that we need to be having these conversations everywhere at all times, and becoming more sensitive at every opportunity to the burden that other people live with. Creating spaces and opportunities for education and for just getting together, you know, like, and having fun oftentimes helps. You know, if you connect with somebody who's different from you and you have a good experience with them, you're often more likely to understand where they're coming from and build a stronger relationship. And if you do that one person at a time, you have a stronger community. So, you know, programming in the parks, programming in the schools, adult education, you know, Brookline recreation, you know, in everywhere we can, we should be fostering conversations and just gathering, not necessarily conversations about DEI, but conversations about, you know, what did you do for dinner? Things like that are really helpful. Thank you.
I didn't mean not to not look at you, but I was writing down what you said.
Okay.
That's how I listen.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
You know how, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Carlos.
Well, thanks, Arthur, for that question. I've been thinking about it since you asked it back in a week ago or two, because I don't know what answer I have. I don't think my answer is ever going to be right, because I don't know what the right answer is. As someone who grew up in a different culture, in a different country, with a different language, I sort of understand that there's always differences. There's always people look at you in one way or another, either because of your last name that is hard to pronounce, or whichever way it is, or maybe if your name doesn't match the way you look. It's like, what's going on? And that's because my mother is Polish. But And I think, we just have to look at how not only racism, which, yes, there is, and I don't think we can get rid of it. We can just start to maybe understand it more. But it's also all the other isms, as my colleagues have said. And I think it really comes down to sort of understanding, and I think this community, Brookline, can do it, understanding where everybody's coming from, understanding that there are differences, and understanding that the differences are actually a good thing. They're not sort of something that is negative, but it's what makes the community so diverse. It's also what makes sort of all the options that we have of living in a community different from each other. So if I would hope that a more diverse, as the community gets more diverse or understands its diversity, that the racism and other isms sort of take a back step, rather than where a community where everybody looks the same. So I that's my best answer so far, but I'm still thinking about it.
Continue to think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are, at the time where we had hoped to end, but I do have one more question I'd like to ask from the cards, but I would like you to answer it in just 1 minute each, if you don't mind. We're going to go 10 minutes over, but after 10 of these forums, what's another 10 minutes? It's okay with you, I hope, to handle the question and then go to your closing statements. Okay, here's the question. North and South Brookline are very different in terms of geography, density, accessibility to transit and town services. And so that's created some sense of division between the North and the South. They're almost like separate towns. What would you do to try to create a sense of cohesion and a feeling of one Brookline? And that will be Liz, Carlos, then Michael. And as I said, try to be brief on this one.
Right, okay, I'm just going to start right now, so okay. North Brookline and South Brookline each have gems that can be enjoyed by the other, and part of this is a matter of access and ease, and and being aware of programming. But one thing that I'd love to see happen, the senior center is going to be needing more money for transportation, and I would love to see that the transportation that's built in there be turned into a more general transportation between North and South Brookline. We could have an electric vehicle that kind of loops around that could be, okay, I'm hovering up. Anyway, we could have an electric vehicle that's dedicated towards connecting North and South Brookline and all of the wonderful things that are in both communities, and also useful things and medical things. Okay, done.
Thank you. Carlos.
So the complicated answer or question gets the 1 minute. So I mean, people talk about North Brookline and South Brookline. I don't see it that way. I think there's North Brookline. There's at least 3 Brooklines: North, Middle, South. Where does, in the last question about development in North Brookline, I was actually thinking Chestnut Hill was also North Brookline because it's next to the T. So where, what is really those divisions? And I think we have to really stop thinking that way, and we have to look at the town as a whole, because because South Brookline is missing things that North Brookline has, and North Brookline is missing things that South Brookline has, if we call it that way. And it's only when you do the full picture is that when you get the cohesive town that we have. If you divided,
Concluded.
I would just say, if you divided the town just in those 2 and made it into 2 governments, then there would be clear parts that each of those parts, those 2 governments are missing. And the fact that we're just one, we have to stop thinking and pitting ourselves against each other, because we're both winning from each other's side.
Okay. Michael.
Okay, so let me focus on 2 aspects of bringing those 2 areas together. One is communication, and the second one is transportation. And if I have time for a third, it would probably be some form of programming. So in terms of communication, one of the biggest challenges is that I believe that a lot of residents, and it's actually been reflected in some of the questions tonight, think about their neighborhoods, whether it is, north of north of Beacon Street along Harvard, or in South Brookline, as being separate and sort of their area, and so we don't as a community have shared concern. And so I think that when we talk about the benefits of different areas in town, and this is also true in terms of our development strategy and how we can bring more housing and commercial development, that we have to think about those projects in the ways that they benefit the entire town. And so I had time for one, and that is my one.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to the closing statements. 2 minutes from each candidate. And the order for the closing statements will be first Carlos, then Michael, then Liz. Carlos, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Sean, and thank you for the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance and all of you for the opportunity to answer your thoughtful questions and present my vision for Brookline. Later this week, those who requested early voting ballots will be receiving in the mail. And in 10 days, April 26th, early voting starts. Early voting in person starts. So I believe that my experience on the advisory committee and various other zoning committees, along with my professional expertise, prepare me for addressing critical issues such as balancing the budget, zoning, climate change, multimodal transportation, and housing affordability. It is time to elect someone who has a holistic approach, understanding of the town, and a clear vision of how we can all work together towards a more affordable and diverse Brookline. Increasing the commercial tax base through smart growth and creating more opportunities for commercial development is our ticket towards balancing the budget without relying on recurring property tax overrides that hurt the middle class and those living on a fixed income. Smart growth is housing affordability by creating housing that is proportionate to existing neighborhoods. Smart growth is multimodal street design by promoting safety and convenience to all in the neighborhood, with neighborhood support. And smart growth supports our municipal services, teachers, police, firefighters, and public workers. With smart growth, we can revitalize and expand our commercial areas and become more diverse and vibrant community. We need to look at the town more holistically and propose multi-pronged approach to our challenges. As an architect, that's what I'll do every day at work. That's what I do every day at work, and I will work with a team of professionals to craft a solution. When you vote in the next few weeks, in mail or in person, I ask you to consider my vision, my expertise in town and professionally, and vote for me. You can visit my website at electcarlos.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
So thank you to the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance for the opportunity to speak tonight and to answer all of your excellent questions. I want to close by focusing on some of the leadership skills for your next select board member. First, a leader must deeply understand all of the challenges that Brookline faces today and have a vision for what Brookline can be in the future. I've shared a vision with you tonight that I believe we can all share. A vibrant and diverse community with thriving small businesses and homes for every stage of life, interwoven with the natural world. Realizing a vision takes hard work, gathering diverse perspectives, adjusting direction, developing and implementing solutions, and holding ourselves accountable. A good leader communicates well, whether sharing ideas or listening to a neighbor's struggles. A good leader uses resources wisely and respectfully, treats everyone with dignity, and keeps a close eye on our finances. I have done this work over and over again in many different situations, and I look forward to bringing my skills and expertise to the Select Board. Therefore, I am asking for your vote on May 6th, and thank you all very much.
Liz.
Thank you for waiting till the very end of the end. So it was a pleasure being up here tonight, and thanks for coming out, everybody. It's safe to say that all of the candidates agree on the issues. I think at this point we're gonna, we could be a good team. And every select board member relies on our experienced town staff, advisors, and public input to guide their decisions, so none of us are gonna be doing this alone. The big difference is our perspective. I have the advantage of a front row seat to many of the most challenging issues we face. I live and work within a dense commercial area where the ecosystem of walkable neighborhoods, green space, transportation, and mixed-use development relies on balancing competing needs in small spaces. Every neighborhood has its own unique assets and challenges, but what we have in common is interwoven issues that require good communication and real balance. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I alone can fix our problems, and suggesting that smart development or smart growth is our silver bullet to lower taxes does miss a point. We've been trying for decades to increase commercial development in Brookline, and for a host of reasons have produced minimal results. Community support through the comprehensive plan of which I'm working is critical for this. And so aside from trying to figure out who to vote for tonight, please, give some input. I represent the common sense experience of a local small business owner whose weather changes from shifting markets to changing technologies to a host of other variables. Like any professional, I balance budgets, hire, consult, collaborate, and take care of business in a world that constantly adapts to new realities. I understand what this means for Brookline. Our small business districts in particular, our walkable commercial areas play a significant role in our community, and this experience and perspective is missing from the board. I ask for your vote on May 6th. Please reach out to me through Liz Linder, 4brookline.org, and thank you for your consideration. And I didn't get the stop sign. I cut a couple sentences,
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Like the candidates, I thank the BNA, especially Linda Roseman and Dan Salzman for all their work in organizing this event, and I thank Alyssa Jonas for being our timekeeper. Thanks also to the Brookline Interactive Group for recording the event. I think that'll be posted in a few days, and we will spread the word through our website and through emails to the BNA list, the TMMA list, and so on, as soon as that link is available. Above all, I thank the candidates for participating and for running and their commitment to public service, and I thank the audience for such excellent questions. Remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, May 6th, or during early voting, or by mail, however you choose to do it, but please vote. Thank you again.
Thank you.